The year was 1991 when I attended my high school junior prom with my girlfriend at the time. There was nothing unusual about the prom. Hundreds of teenagers in garish dress dancing and partying, crowning their king and queen. Neither I nor my girlfriend were in the popular or cool kids crowd, and we planned on nothing more than a late night stop at a restaurant after the prom ended. As it turned out, we were invited to go along in someone's limo to visit the White Lady's Castle, the ruins of a small villa overlooking the Lake Ontario shore. Local legend held that years ago, a teenage girl ran off on a date with a local boy despite the objections of her overprotective mother. The girl had supposedly stormed out of the house, saying that she was going up to the lake with the boy and would be back that evening. According to the legend, she never returned, and her mother is said to have gone out looking for her missing girl every night for the rest of her days. It's said that her spirit haunts the site to this day, and that illicit teenage lovers parked along the shore would be attacked by her ghost. All that remains of the White Lady's Castle is a single stone wall set into the hillside. Flagstone steps take you from the road below up to a flat grassy area where the structure once stood. Someone in the limo handed out flashlights as we pulled alongside the lake shore and got out. Now, although I've had a few of what I believe to be true paranormal experiences in my life, I didn't think this particular legend could really be true. It all sounded a little too stereotypical of a made-up ghost story for me. We made our way to the hillside and began to climb the steps along the ruined wall. As we reached the top, the moon, which had provided a soft illumination to the lakeshore, suddenly vanished behind the clouds. We found ourselves in a pitch-black clearing. Several of the kids in the group were laughing and trying to scare each other. It was dark that I couldn't see my hand in front of my face, if not for the bobbing lights from the flashlights casting shadows across everyone in the group. I began to get an eerie feeling as I scanned my flashlight around the perimeter of the clearing, the light beam ending abruptly at the trees surrounding us. I couldn't put my finger on it exactly, but it almost felt like we were being watched. I turned back to look into the darkness one last time and shined my flashlight across the tree line, and as my light moved, a face suddenly flashed into view as my light moved by. It was only for a second, but I could clearly make out a stark white face with an oversized mouth full of sharp teeth and deep hollow black eyes. Startled, I quickly shined my light back to the spot where I'd seen the face, but there was nothing there. For a moment, I decided that it must have been my imagination and turned back to leave. When I reached the top of the stairs, however, I heard a wheezing groan from the darkness behind me. I quickly turned back and pointed my flashlight into the darkness. Right in the exact spot where I had seen the ghoulish white face was the outline of a person. A flowing white form was slowly moving towards me, and I could just about make out the oversized mouth and teeth I had seen before. Terrified, I turned and literally ran down the stairs and back out into the light of the moon. My girlfriend and the other kids from the group hadn't even noticed that I'd fallen behind and were beginning to load into the limo across the street. I couldn't bring myself to look back over my shoulder as I climbed in, quietly stunned by what I experienced. Of course, none of them believed my story and assumed I was just goofing around and trying to scare them. But I know what I saw, and I know what I heard. I've been back to the site once or twice over the last 25 years, but only in the daytime. I've come back here today to share my story with you and to ponder the memory of that night at the White Lady's Castle. I've always heard odd things and seen the supernatural, though usually it's just a general feel or whisper in a house with a haunting that's human, that is. But recently, something's changed, and it's really freaking me out. It all started when I started university in Devon, England. I'd been very sick for a couple of days with a nasty cold and was just starting to feel better. So my flatmate and I decided to go out to the town for a lunch out. All went as planned, and we managed to catch one of the sparse buses in the nick of time. This is where it gets a little odd. I always gaze out the window whenever I'm traveling, so I don't miss much. Usually, it's just a fox running across a field, or a nice view. But this time, it was a guy. He was sticking his arm out for the bus. This obviously wasn't the odd thing. What was odd was he didn't even have a face. He was dressed in a pair of jeans and a black hoodie, with the hood up, and looked as if he was wearing one of those joke black morph suits over his face. I laughed a little to myself, expecting a general prank. The bus stopped, letting people off, but no one got on. This made me frown a little, as I'd seen the guy waving, so I asked my friend if she'd seen him. She didn't, and when I pressed her further, simply said the illness must have made me sleep deprived. I thought about this for a while and decided she was probably right. After all, the mind can play tricks on you when you're tired, and I'd never seen anything like that before in my life. However, after that event, I started to see odd things all the time. Shadows of people where there were no people, odd faces in windows, and strange noises. It also wasn't the only no faces I'd see. When I was still at university, there was this truly horrifying apparition outside my flat, always there whenever I opened my curtains, night or day. It was extremely tall. No, this is not Slenderman, and this figure had long, greasy hair over its face. But I knew that it was smiling, and not a very nice smile either. It scared me to the point where I started to stay over at my current partner's, using the excuse of poor sleep thanks to my cheap mattress. Mind you, not that I could get much sleep knowing that thing was outside. I'm not sure what to do or what it means, and it's scaring me. I see the no-face people everywhere, in corners, at train stations. I try not to get too close. I even tried to talk to one once, but it didn't result in much. They just stared at me. Obviously, seeing these odd things have become a bit of a problem socially. It's not exactly acceptable to flinch for no reason or look alarmed at the slightest thing. I just can't help it. They make me nervous and scared. I don't know what they are, after all, but they just don't seem human. I mean, some of them do human things, like the waving down of the bus, but the majority of the time, they just seem to be watching and following people. Some of them have quite a solid shape, just like another person. aside from the obvious face thing, but others seem to just be odd shadows. Can anyone help me with this? If you've seen the same, what does it mean that I've started to see things? And am I in any danger? A few years ago, I posted my story about seeing the people with no faces. Things had stayed the same for all these years, and I'd gotten used to seeing them, even if it unnerved me more than a little. But now, things have changed. Not so long ago, I was taken into hospital after having a 4-hour seizure, and it was touch and go for the month that I was there. I was diagnosed with a central nervous disorder, one where I have a 30% chance of survival. But I'm determined. They didn't think I would walk again, but I proved them all wrong, and am currently able to get around on crutches. After all that, I'd been so focused on getting better, I'd more or less forgotten about the no-faced people. For those who aren't quite sure what I mean by that, I'll give a description. You know when people wear those morph suits that cover your face? They kind of look like that, but the skin is always black, and they don't have very clear facial features, more like a suggestion of them being there. Anyway, I soon remembered the day I left hospital. I was in high spirits, happy I was leaving, more or less on my own 2 feet. It was then that I noticed one of the no-faced people standing at the entrance, and it was different. It looked straight at me, a lot more intensely than the usual glance. Yes, I was disturbed at the time, but just assumed it was a one-off. That soon changed. They started to move closer and closer to me. Then it really kicked off. Doors started to rattle behind me, as if someone were trying to get in, but when I opened them, no one would be there. Even that only scared me a little. But now, I'm really scared. The other night, I was relaxing, preparing to settle for sleep. I suddenly felt something grab and twist my foot. At first, I laughed, thinking it was my cat playing, until I realized that my cat was lying asleep next to me, nowhere near my feet. I've read many theories of shadow people, and I've often wondered if the no-faced people are something alike. So perhaps a reflection of a dimension close to ours, or something more sinister. I'm scared because I'm aware that I still have a 70% chance of becoming sicker and dying. Are they attempting to increase this chance as they've suddenly become more aggressive? Or does it mean my body is failing without me realizing? I don't know, but I really hope that someone on here can help me and shed some light on this. Please. This is my first time talking about any of this outside of my close childhood friends and my doctor. I guess my story begins when I was about 15 years old. At the time, a few friends and I were interested in ghosts and magic, so when rumors spread around that there was a Ouija board for sale at the thrift store, we pounced on the opportunity. It took us a few weeks to get the courage to use it, but we finally decided to try it out in our tree house we had built in my front yard. We waited until it got dark, lit some candles I stole from dining table, and started our little seance. At first, All we could do was stare at each other, but finally, my brother asked if there was any spirits with us, and that little eyepiece slowly moved over to the yes section. We were all shaking at that point. Being a scaredy cat back then, well, I said I was getting out of there, but as I backed up, I fell out of the treehouse. The next thing I know, I'm awake in a hospital bed with both my parents crying about how they love me, and soon the doctor came in and explained that I had a cracked skull and had suffered a major concussion. As the nurse wheeled me around the hospital, I noticed a slight blurriness around the edges of my vision. The doctor said that it was normal for people who have suffered from concussions. As I started to recover, I noticed that the blurriness had subsided and life was beginning to return to normal, but there was still something wrong. I felt like I was being followed because even though the blurriness was still gone, there was still something in the corner of my vision. Every time I turned to look at whatever was following me, it was gone, around a corner or fading into the darkness. I could never get a good look at it. The first night since the accident, I had a hard time falling asleep, and I kept waking up with chills. After hours of tossing and turning, lightly falling asleep and waking, I finally fell asleep. When I woke up in the morning, something didn't seem right with my room, like something was going to happen. As I got up, I noticed a tall, gangly shape in the corner of my eye, next to the dresser, and turned quickly to see a horrifying creature without a face, just a pale, featureless face, apart from two impossibly deep black holes where the eyes should be. At first, all I could do is stare into those two black holes and silently scream, but I finally slammed my eyes shut and started screaming. When my parents burst in my room and asked what was wrong, I told them what I had seen, but they insisted I had been dreaming. I did not see the faceless thing for about 10 years later. The no face, as I had named it, did not appear again until the accident that ended my fiance's life. After that, I began seeing him everywhere, and there were more than one, following other people. I began to see a therapist for my hallucinations, and she recommended an MRI and a CAT scan, both of which were inconclusive, and she determined that these hallucinations are coping mechanisms that I subconsciously created to cope with the stress of my fiancé. The trouble is, these things haven't gone away, even though I've come to terms with her death. The other no-faces seem unaware of my presence, other than the one that keeps following me. It stays about 1 to 2 yards away from me at all times and never gets too close or too far away. Can anyone here help me? I've become very stressed over this lately. I haven't had much to eat and haven't slept very well.